All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the first half of Harper Lee's absolute classic text to uncover Atticus Finch's masterclass in building moral resilience in his children. We're going to look past the standard takeaways you might remember from English class and examine exactly how a parent purposefully arms their kids for an incredibly hostile world.
So let's kick things off with the big, overarching question driving our whole analysis today. Because it's not just about what happens in the fictional town of Maycomb, it's a universal question of moral survival. How do you teach a child to survive a deeply sick society without catching the disease?
To really get the stakes here, we have to understand the environment. Think of Maycomb, Alabama, like a giant, rigid block of amber. It's a tower totally frozen in time. And sure, that amber perfectly preserves the social order, but man, it is completely suffocating to anyone stuck inside it. In Maycomb, your social survival depends entirely on not disrupting the resin. People don't just know their neighbors, they know their neighbors' predetermined moral worth based on literally centuries of family history.
All right, Section 1, Tactical Empathy.
We see the first major clash with this frozen town on Scout's disastrous first day of school. Her new teacher, Miss Caroline, walks in with total institutional blindness. She completely misses the nuanced, unwritten rules that separate families living in the exact same level of crushing poverty. On one hand, you've got the Cunninghams. Deeply impoverished, sure, but they survive on a super strict moral code of never taking what they can't repay. And then, on the other hand, there are the Yules. Openly defiant, lacking any moral discipline, and literally only showing up to school to appease the truant officer. But Miss Caroline ends up punishing Scout just for trying to translate these unwritten caste rules when Walter Cunningham refuses a quarter for lunch. Scout goes home feeling utterly defeated. And this is exactly where Atticus drops the philosophical bedrock of the whole text. He tells Scout she needs to climb into Miss Caroline's skin and walk around in it. Now notice what Atticus is doing here. He isn't teaching empathy as some fuzzy, feel-good emotion. No way. He's teaching it as a highly tactical survival mechanism for navigating broken systems. By stepping into her teacher's shoes, Scout can actually survive the classroom without losing her own identity or, having to pretend she doesn't know how to read.
Moving on to Section 2, Humanizing the Boogeyman.
So if empathy is a survival tool, what happens when you apply it to someone totally outside of society, the ultimate neighborhood outcast? At first, the kids treat Boo Radley like an abstract monster, literally acting out his tragic family history in their front yard. But then, this monster becomes terrifyingly human through a knothole in an old oak tree. We can actually track his desperately vulnerable attempts to communicate here. Week 1, he leaves chewing gum. Week 2, scrubbed Indian head pennies. By month 3, it's intricate soap carvings of the kids. Month 4, a broken pocket watch. It builds and builds right up until the devastating moment in month 5 when his brother Nathan violently severs that connection by filling the hole with solid cement.
When Jem discovers that cement, he stands on his porch in the dark and just cries. He cries because he finally, successfully applies his dad's lesson. He steps into Boo's skin and feels that suffocating loneliness. But, and here's the real kicker, he also realizes the terrifying pragmatism of Nathan Radley. Think about it. In a deeply prejudiced 1930s Southern town, a neurodivergent adult secretly trying to contact young kids. That doesn't end with a heartwarming town hall. It ends with an asylum or a mob. Nathan's cruel use of cement might actually be a brutal yet incredibly effective way to keep a vulnerable Boo alive.
The town is so utterly intolerant that absolute isolation is literally the only form of safety. And yet, Boo's desire to protect others outweighs his own fear. During a freezing neighborhood fire, while Scout is completely distracted, the so-called malevolent phantom secretly drapes a heavy woolen blanket right over her shoulders. It's a huge wake-up call for the kids. They start to slowly realize the real monsters aren't hiding in the dark at all. The real monsters are walking proudly in the daylight.
And this realization couldn't be timed better, because Atticus is about to proactively armor his kids against what he clinically diagnoses as Maycomb's disease, which is this stark raving madness that infects otherwise reasonable people the very second race becomes involved. With the Tom Robinson trial looming, Atticus knows the town is going to turn on them, and he has to get them ready for it.
That brings us to Section 3, The Discipline of Resistance.
Atticus takes the case knowing he's going to lose. He chooses personal integrity over social survival because it's a moral imperative. But he immediately offloads the heavy cost of that integrity onto his kids. Look at the mechanics of this passive resistance. Cecil Jacobs publicly taunts Scout about her dad in the schoolyard. Scout, whose literal default setting is to throw fists, astonishingly drops them and walks away. I mean, Atticus is demanding a staggering level of psychological discipline here, forcing an 8-year-old to absorb the malice of an entire town without reflecting it back. And she holds it together, right up until Christmas, when cousin Frances parrots inherited prejudice, and her restraint just shatters, leading to a fight. Then Uncle Jack unfairly punishes Scout without even listening to her side, highlighting a really profound failure of the adults in the room.
Which sets up Section 4, Redefining True Courage.
Since Atticus knows he absolutely cannot protect his kids from the town's anger forever, he has to fundamentally redefine what heroism actually looks like to keep the disease from infecting them. And he gives us 2 radically contrasting examples. First, the man with a gun. A rabid dog threatens the street, and Atticus drops it with a single shot, total physical dominance. But he hides this talent because he views relying on a gun as a failure of intellect. He actively tears down the glamour of that physical violence by contrasting it with the woman in withdrawal, Mrs. Dubose, the meanest woman in town, fighting an agonizing internal battle of grueling moral endurance.
Let's look at how this crucible plays out. Jem snaps and destroys Mrs. Dubose's camellias in a fit of rage after she yells racist venom at him. Atticus's punishment? He forces Jem to read to her every single afternoon for a month. While he reads, she suffers these horrifying narcotic withdrawal fits. It turns out she's a late-stage addict, using Jem's reading to stretch the time between her doses so she can die entirely clean. Now, locking your kid in a room with a verbally abusive addict sounds wildly irresponsible, right? But Atticus is using her terrifying detox as a brutal training ground. Think about it. If Jem can't handle an old woman's insults without breaking things, how on earth is he going to survive the town's grown men threatening them over the trial?
After she dies, beholden to nothing and nobody, Atticus delivers the payoff. Real courage is knowing you're licked before you begin, but beginning anyway and seeing it through, no matter what. He uses her agonizing struggle to prove that human beings are just terrifyingly complex. He shows Jem that you can utterly despise someone's racist worldview while still recognizing their profound, unbreakable spirit.
And the number 100, that's the absolute key here. Atticus actually told his brother they were licked 100 years before they even started the Tom Robinson case. Mrs. Dubose's fight is an exact mirror of why he defends Tom, knowing the jury will convict, knowing the whole town is against him, but fighting, armed only with reason, to the bitter end. He wants their moral compass guided entirely by internal conviction, not physical dominance.
And finally, Section 5, Lessons Learned in the Dark. Over just a few chapters, that suffocating amber around the children completely shatters. They are painfully, but brilliantly, equipped to face their sick society. Remember Scout's fight at Christmas? Afterward, Atticus has a super grave conversation with Uncle Jack about his desperate hope that the kids survive the impending trial. Scout is hiding, eavesdropping on complicated truths in the dark. Years later, she realizes Atticus knew she was there the whole time. He purposefully allowed her to secretly overhear his fears. He weaponized her curiosity to deliver this massive, worldview-shifting lesson about the town's disease. A raw, unfiltered truth she definitely would have rejected if he had just sat her down and lectured her.
It really is an absolute masterclass in moral education. And I'll leave you with this provocative thought to consider about how your own morality was constructed. When you look back at your foundational beliefs, was your personal moral framework neatly constructed by the explicit rules you were taught on a chalkboard? Or was it actually forged by eavesdropping on raw, unfiltered, complicated truths in the dark? Think about it. Thanks for tuning in to this explainer, and hey, keep questioning the amber around you.